Custodians. This is Dr. Carter. I will be going over the course syllabus for you. I'll try to keep it brief. I have a tendency of being a little long-winded, but I'll do the best I can to cover the most pertinent information of the syllabus. If you do have any questions, please feel free to contact me. You can contact me via Schoology message, or you can contact me via my email, which is jcarter@gocalico.org. All right. So here we go. Email contact information, telephone number, Schoology. I do use Schoology pretty regularly. Every assignment that will be done for this semester will be on Schoology and posted. Also, you have the ability to see when you have linked with your son or daughter's Schoology, you'll be able to see which assignments they've submitted and which ones they have not submitted on the left-hand side. When you're viewing Schoology as them, if you go to grades, you can see which assignments have been submitted and which ones have not. And I export those over to those grades over to PowerSchool. The first two paragraphs here are just simply an overview of kind of what the course is about. We do talk about capitalism, federalism, socialism, communism, monetary policy, fiscal policy, free trade, democracy, and so forth. And we also scrutinize the foundations of American government and political parties, historical documents. The biggest thing to take from those two paragraphs and from the whole entire course is that I don't teach the course as if it's just facts and dates and historical stuff and economic concepts and just dry and not linked to today's society and today's economic system and today's political environment. I try to do the best I can to teach in a way that students can see the relevancy of what they're learning. I honestly believe and feel that if individuals don't see the relevancy in why they're learning something, they won't retain it or they won't care to learn it. So I believe that Civics and Government is a very important course, and I think it's a very relevant course. I've always thought that. So I think that by tying it into what's going on today, economically speaking and politically speaking, so we can see it not just nationally but also internationally, I think it's very important for students to see that. So that's kind of what these two paragraphs talk about. That's kind of how the course is done. So I try to link stuff together as best as possible with things that are going on today or that have gone on in the recent past, which would be all the way back to the end of the Cold War in the 1990s, or even into the 1980s and so forth. Because I think that recent history sometimes doesn't get covered as well in the earlier grades or ninth grade and so forth. So I do think that sometimes we have to spend a little time in Civics and Government explaining the end of the Cold War and the United States' role in a world where we were considerably the only superpower. So, sorry about that little tangent there. Rules and so forth in class, they're 11th graders. Pretty basic. Respect yourself and others. Cheating is not acceptable. Be prepared for class. And be in your seat when the bell rings. Expectations. Take notes during class. Now, all the notes actually are online and on Schoology. I have showed them how to actually use the note part in PowerPoint, and I also have showed them how to insert like sticky notes or highlight comments on PDF documents that I use, so they can do that. And of course, they can always take paper and pencil notes. I prefer that more than anything else. Now, once the COVID requirements and stuff and the regulations change and we get back to normal, I might rely less on the digital format for certain types of things and go back to more paper. But as of right now, I've kind of stuck with that because students are a little more familiar with it, and it seems to work well. Now, students can always print out their notes if they would want to, because they're always available for them to do so. Follow directions, of course. Never sell yourself short. Always give your best. I think it's a good motto to live by, and it's an important thing to do. Grading, students. There are students who will get A pluses. There are also students who will get or earn Fs. To earn an F in a class is kind of difficult. There are many opportunities for students to showcase their understanding and their learning. They just need to complete them and hand them in. They are graded for correctness. There is also a completeness factor that's also worked into their grade, but They just really need to submit stuff. And things are weighted, which I'll talk about a little bit later on in the syllabus itself. So, the outline of the curriculum, there are 6 major units. There's the fundamental economics. We do that first because there really is no other area devoted in the 3 years of social studies curriculum that students get here, co-curricular, that is actually based in economics. It's kind of woven into the other 2 other years, but there is no simple here are economic principles and stuff. So we kind of thought that this would be a good spot to put them in. So we have done that. There's the fundamentals of government. It's kind of more or less a comparative government unit. Before we dive into the American government, we use a comparative government. So we kind of compare all these governments around the world and stuff like that, and somewhat compare them to the United States, but we kind of try to stay back a little bit from the U.S. so that they can see these other countries and how they operate, whether it's a monarchy, an oligarchy, or whether they decide to use a parliamentary system or presidential system and so forth. And then we go into the American government. And this is where we start with British law all the way back in 1215 with the Magna Carta, and we work our way all the way up through. And that's where a lot of these documents come from. Now, these are predominantly American documents, but we do also use the British English Bill of Rights, and also in the Magna Carta, which would be 2 British documents. So we talk about the importance of the Mayflower Compact, the Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, which was the first national constitution. Didn't do so well, so they rewrote it, or actually kind of took most of it away and added new stuff to it, which makes the U.S. Constitution. And we talk about the different branches of government and their powers that they have. Then we go into the Civil Liberties Unit. We talk about the importance of citizenship, and we talk about the rights and responsibilities that come along with being a citizen. There are rights, which is awesome and it's wonderful, and there are also responsibilities. A lot of times, society focuses on our rights, which is great. I think that's wonderful. But there are a lot of responsibilities that come with being a citizen, and we don't focus on those so much. We kind of sometimes ignore them, and that's kind of sad. I mean, I think that if we want to have our rights, we also have responsibilities with those, and along with those rights, in order to protect them, we need to be responsible. So, the First and Third Amendments we talk about. We talk about the Fourth Amendment, and in its regards to the Patriot Act and how that has changed the Fourth Amendment and so forth. So that has really expanded after 9/11. The passage of the Patriot Act really expanded the government's ability to kind of go somewhat around the Fourth Amendment. So we talk about how that has changed things, and digital technology has changed that too in ways even without the Patriot Act would have still changed that. So that's an important thing for students to see. As an individual who grew up in a world without cell phones and almost without, well, the internet existed, but it wasn't for like personal home use. As a child, it wasn't until I got into I guess high school really that the internet really started to kind of come around. It's a different world that they live in. So I explain that to them. The Fifth and Sixth Amendments, the rights of the accused are very important, so we talk about those. We do the 7 through 10 amendments, and then we pick certain amendments after the 10 amendments, after the Bill of Rights, because certain amendments in the U.S. Constitution deal with functioning of government. They don't actually deal with civil liberties. So we do the 13th through the 15th, the 19th, 24th, and 26th amendments, and then they do a Bill of Rights project, which I'll talk about. And then we talk about local government. We talk about the Commonwealth government. We talk about our Constitution, and we look at the 1776 Constitution, which was our state constitution, actually Commonwealth Constitution, but that actually was when Pennsylvania became its own country from 1776 until 1790 when we actually drafted another constitution. And ratified the Constitution, U.S. Constitution. We were actually our own country, which a lot of people don't really realize that the 13 original, we call them colonies, of course, but the 13 original signers of the U.S. Constitution, between when they declared their independence and signed the U.S. Constitution, they actually were their own countries. So it is kind of interesting. And then we talk about the county government, which in Pennsylvania doesn't have as much strength as it does in other states like Florida or Maryland and stuff like that. And then we talk about that comparison. But municipal government, where you have your local governments, your depending on if you live in a borough or if you live in the township, they have a lot more power than the county does. And then we talk about school districts and and the power that they have and school boards that they have. And we talk about, I even show them where school board policies are, and we talk about those types of things. And it's very interesting when they actually get to see. I have a book from, I think it's the West Cocalico Township, and it's actually about 2.5 inches thick of all the municipal code and laws. And I actually explained to them some of the issues that I've had. I wouldn't say issues per se, but the concerns. I guess concerns sound better. That when I lived in Raffo Township and now I live in Manheim Borough, but the times that I've had to go to the township about getting certain things done or building things or asking questions about stuff, how you always need to go back to the ordinances. The ordinances will tell you what you can and can't do. And I try to explain that to them that municipal and Commonwealth government, or the two levels of government, you will come in far more contact than any others than the national, but it's important to know about all of them. And then we do political parties, and we talk about political parties, how they organize, how they function, what's their role, what role do they technically supposed to serve, and what role do they serve, the nominating process, general elections, and I talk about, primary elections, and how that's different in Pennsylvania versus other states with being a closed primary. We talk about general elections. I talk about voter influences, what influences voters, and we talk about interest groups. We talk about political action committees. Talk about public opinion, what shapes their public opinion, and we talk about who shapes their public opinion and how that shapes their public opinion, and how their family is the biggest influencer of their political public opinion, and how pretty much where they are at now politically really doesn't change. Well, it can for some people, but for the majority of individuals, how they are now politically doesn't always change. Sometimes it strengthens in intensity, but generally it pretty much stays the same. But it can change over time depending on influences around them. And then they run a student election, a mock election in the classroom. This is just additional information. I hope that they're here every day. When students were out there for when the SARS-CoV-2 or COVID or coronavirus, whatever name you would like to call it, when it went through the school, there were some students that were meeting on Google Meets, and when students are out, and there is more of them out, I will, of course, use Google Meet for them. Classroom rules, follow the handbook. It used to be their own, they used to get that agenda, but now it's all online. Homework, I do expect them to do homework. Homework is an extension of our learning. It normally either reinforces something we did that day during class, or it helps to introduce something we're going to do the following day. Class participation, there are different ways to participate in class. You don't always have to raise your hand and always have to do that. There's group projects to participate in. There's pair groupings you can participate in. And of course, you can raise your hand and ask questions too, or you can just touch base with me. The students can talk to me after class, or when I'm walking around the room and so forth. I found that by calling on particular students, some teachers like doing that, but I like to allow the students to actively engage when they feel comfortable in doing so. Quizzes and examinations, there are quizzes and there are exams. The late work policy has kind of been waived at this marking period, meaning that generally if something's late, it gets reduced by 50%, but the issue that's going on because of students being out, students being quarantined, stuff like that, I've kind of waived all that. So pretty much my policy has been just get the work completed, do the best that you can on it, hand it in, and you will always have the possibility of earning 100% on it if it is 100% correct. So the grade category here, or the percentage of the quarter for each quarter, I have it as 50% goes to examinations or things that are in exam category, 30% goes to projects, 5% goes to homework, 10% goes to daily assignments, and 5% goes to quizzes. So that comes out to 100. So the students forget that things are weighted in the class, and sometimes they get bogged down on certain assignments. So for the students that sometimes get a little bit behind on things, I'll always try to help and pinpoint which assignments are worth more in the actual quarter grade to actually focus on. So sometimes that helps them a lot more, and so forth. And then, so I'm sorry, I got a little bit ahead of myself here. For the final course grade, generally what we do is I do a midterm, and it's not really a midterm per se. It's just the Unit 3 test I count as a midterm, and then they have a final exam, of course, and then they have a final project. Now, with that midterm is students sometimes get stressed when they hear that, but what I really tell them is it's just a Unit 3 test, and I just put it in that category, in the E1 category, because I feel that having a letter grade tied into one exam isn't quite fair at this level because they're taking two finals on one day potentially. And I tell them even in post-secondary education, you'll never generally take two finals on the same day. They always have your schedule set up so that you take one final a day. So I feel that that's fair, so we do that. And students actually like that. Once they actually see that get inputted that way, they're actually okay with that. Now, we do the Create a State project, which is what they're working on currently. We'll try to do the Constitutional Signers iBook, depending on whether we're able to get a hold of the actual iBook card, but that all depends on what the whole Corona regulations or COVID regulations. So we'll see how that goes. If not, they will still do that project. That project is where they actually research a signer of the U.S. Constitution and they research its state, because I want them to see that the signers were important people, and some of them were wonderful individuals, and some of them were not the best of individuals. And really, the Constitution was, you had some very vocal people, but you had a lot of people doing stuff behind the scenes. But what's interesting is when you start to see and research some of the signers, you start to realize that a lot of their motivation was sometimes personal and driven by their state. So that's one thing. But then the other way to look at it is each one of those states was its own little experimental petri dish for government. So you had 13 different states, except for Rhode Island, they didn't send it anyway. So you only have 12. You have 12 different states and commonwealths who sent representatives to the convention in Philadelphia. And each of those 12 states and commonwealths had a constitution. And they had been running under those constitutions for, 10, 15 years. So they had seen what would work and what didn't work. So they took that knowledge with them when they drafted the Constitution. So it wasn't like they went into this blindly and just all of a sudden created something and they didn't know. They were smart individuals that said, if this is what's working, let's not throw it out and try something completely new. Let's take what's working. Let's take the things that we want and put it together. So I'm sorry, I went on a little tangent there. But that's kind of what I try to show them, and I hope that they get to see as by doing that. Because then they act as they do their own little constitutional convention, and they actually try to develop a constitutional. And then there's Civil Liberties Project. This is where they research a topic, and it's not just simply a pro-con research topic on like an issue like abortion or gun control or same-sex marriage or let's say immigration or rights of prisoners or student searches and seizures or any of that type of stuff. It is simply looking at the constitutionality of it and says, is this constitutional? And if it is, what amendment to the Constitution allows this to happen? And then they also look at Supreme Court cases that say this is constitutional or not constitutional. So we don't get into the morality of the issue. We stay away from that. We look simply and solely at the constitutionality of it. Does the Constitution and does the Bill of Rights and the Civil Liberties support this being legal and being protected or not? And that's what becomes very interesting, is because when they start to look at the legal sense of it, some of those things that we look at, we can see that depending on how things are interpreted in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, we can see that it may not be, and then sometimes it may be. So since sometimes it's all of a matter of interpretation. So it does help them to look at issues through the lens of a constitution, through the constitutionality of it, instead of looking at it through an emotional or a societal lens. It's just simply, does the Constitution say this is legal? Can this occur? Okay. Then we do a mock election where students get to run for office. If we get there, we will, depending on what ends up happening towards the end of the school year. Hopefully we can get there. And then they have a comprehensive portfolio at the end where they will build stuff and put together to show that they what they have learned throughout the semester. Now, it's not just simply a, here, this is what I've got done, Dr. Carter type portfolio, because I've known what they have completed. The portfolio is designed, and the focus of the portfolio is to be they develop it and they write reflections on what they've created. But it's not like, well, this is what I've learned per se. It's more, this is what I've learned and this is what I've taken from this. But I give them focus areas like real life impact. How would I actually use what I've gained from this in the future in not just academia and school, but also out in the real world? Because some of the activities they have to work together as groups. Some of the activities I show them, like the Civil Liberties Project, I actually show them how to build a research project and how to actually build up support for an actual developing an argument. So they pick a side, or they ask the question about an issue, and then they then have to say, okay, these are both the sides to that question. So then they develop claims for those. They develop those claims, and then they develop assertions to support those claims, and then they have to develop evidence. It's how you would build argumentation, and the idea that you would use that throughout your life. It's whether I should buy this house or not. So if I want to buy this house, then I say yes or no, and then I set up, okay, if I say yes or no, the reasons why I wouldn't want to buy this house is because of this, 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 and this, or I would want to buy it because of this, 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 and this, and then you get evidence to support those reasons why or why not. It's what you would do in everyday life, making decisions. It's decision making, and that's kind of what I based that Civil Liberties Project on, in the guise of a constitution, in the guise of an issue. But it's the way so all people could make an informed decision about whether to do something or not to do something. So that's what they're going to be reflecting on in that comprehensive portfolio, and that's what I'm hoping that they get to. My belief for the or the scope or kind of not scope, but the audience of what I tell them that they're developing the portfolio for is not for someone like me, because I know all that stuff, and I say for them is as if you're developing this portfolio for your parents or for someone in the community to say this is the justification for these projects in this classroom. Why am I doing this? Because I think that's important, because I don't think we reflect enough in school and in life about why we do the things that we do, and learn from them. Because I think true growth in life in general comes from reflecting and seeing why we do what we do, and learning from that, whether it was good or whether it was bad. So that's the class in a nutshell. I'm sorry I went really long. You can ask your children. I have a tendency doing that all the time, but I hope this was informative. If you do have questions, please email me or message me via Schoology. I would look forward to hearing from you. Other than that, have a wonderful day, and it'd be great to hear from you. Thank you.